Hello, my name is Jim Tolles, and the topic for this video is what is spirituality? Spirituality is a term that people use a lot in many different contexts, many different ways, but I really think it's one of the most confused words that we have in the language around religion and spirituality in general. So what I'm going to offer is my definition. I'm not saying it's the definition you should accept. I'm saying it's a definition to help you do a discovery of your own definitions, your own assumptions around it. And one of the big things that I like to talk about in this space is the difference between higher truth and truth of the moment. And so higher truth is the non-dual world. And in that space, everything is one. Everything is love. Everything is consciousness. Everything is just is. And in the dual world, we have separation, right? There's a me, there's a you, there's this computer, this webcam, there's all these different little separate, discrete pieces. And when I talk about spirituality, I'll speak in both spaces. So spirituality in the higher truth, spirituality is everything. It is love. It is beauty. It is everywhere and everything. It just is. And that's just a beautiful thing. And for most people, it's completely unhelpful. It's like, well, if everything is spirituality, then everything I'm doing is spirituality. And that can be a real misconception that the egoic mind likes to make, where it's like, well, everything's spiritual, so I can go punch the kid across the street, and that's just the spiritual to everything else, right? And it's a misconception of what that higher truth is really saying, which is why having a truth of the moment, a truth in the world of duality around what spirituality is important, because in that space we'll define some things as spiritual and others as not spiritual, and that's a tricky thing. For those of you who've gone through an awakening, it becomes very easy to see the differences because you've tapped into that deeper source, into that higher truth that everything is love. It becomes very clear about what actions are appropriate and what are not, and what is moving from love and what is not. But in the beginning, what is spiritual are definitely things that focus you on love. It really is just that simple. Spirituality is that love, that energy, that kindness, that generosity and charity that you bring into your life. Right? It's in that way that there's a lot of emphasis on the positive. How do we make things come from that space that brings about kindness and gentleness and ease and those things that make us all ultimately feel very good. Although initially getting to some of those things won't always feel good. And that's another thing that I like to delineate in spirituality. Spirituality isn't always the easy way. It isn't always just going with the flow. Like, it's a real combination of things. It's this going with the flow, but you keep your paddle. You do your part in rowing your boat. If you don't do your part in rowing your boat, you're going to end up hitting a rock, or you're going to end up on the shore and you're stuck and you're like, well, how did I get here? I was just going with the flow, right? That's what I should do. It's like, no, that's a piece. And that's also part of the world of duality that we live in, that we need to be in the flow to find that, and it's an inner flow. And it's not always going to be a flow that's easy, but there is an ease to it. And there's that way of going with things that feels true to you. So when I talk and I have sessions, like, there's a real ease to what I'm doing. It's not a difficult thing to talk about spirituality. And it doesn't really have anything to do with how practiced I am. When I do these types of videos and sessions and when I write, it's all very much a free flow. It's just, this is what's coming through. And I've removed a lot of the blockages, the rocks and logs that are stuck in the river, that flow, if we're going to go with that metaphor of the water in the river. I've removed that so I can flow more easily. But initially, many of you haven't removed it. And so this is where, you start to look at things that are unkind, things where you're playing small, right? At the higher level, these are as much as your teachers as well, right? These are as spiritual as anything else. So when you're in the midst of a fight with a loved one, that's just as spiritual as anything else. If you have the proper intention and mindset, you can start to pull back from that. Like, oh, I'm having a reaction here. What is it? What is it that's reacting? What is it that I want? That's how you start to bring that higher truth of everything. Is a moment of spirituality, and everything can be your teacher, whether you're stuck in traffic or, whether you're in the middle of a boring meeting at work. It's like, start to tune in. It really is this kind of switch that we all have, that we can all do, where we start to say, what is happening for me right now? Because ultimately spirituality is always right now. It's never anywhere else. Because we're always right here and right now. We play these games in our heads where we're trying to be someplace else and do something or fix a past moment. But we can't fix a past moment, and we can't be in the future. We can only ever be here. And so spirituality is always right here and right now. And initially some things, your meditation practice, journaling, listening to spiritual videos. There's wonderful teachers on YouTube. It's just absolutely amazing resource. And all the other different resources are out there. Those become spiritual. But they become only spiritual so long as they help you to bring more of that awareness into the rest of your life. Because if you just meditate and you don't bring that in the rest of your life, it's like going to a batting cage to practice hitting baseballs and then not playing the game. It doesn't make any sense. So you do those practices so you can live your life. And that's it. So you can live your life, live it through love and in the fullness of who you are. And that ultimately to me is what spirituality is about. It's just fully being yourself and discovery of what it is that needs to be opened so you can fully be yourself. So I hope this gives you some ideas around what spirituality is and how I talk about it. As I said, basically the higher truth is everything is spiritual. And the truth in the moment is we start to focus our attention on the things that really open us towards that greater understanding. So I hope you've enjoyed this. My name is Jim Tolles. I blog regularly at spiritualawakeningprocess.com. Feel free to check it out. And feel free to check out the other videos that are forthcoming. Thanks.